It is the Martha Zoller Show, and it's always great to be here with you. And it's always great to talk to Douglas Young. He is a longtime professor at the University of North Georgia, now retired, and now he's a novelist. And his new book is a collection of essays that he's written over the years called This Little Opinion plus $1.50 Will Buy You a Coke, a collection of essays. Douglas, thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Martha, and thank you enormously for all you do to inform and enlighten us. We really appreciate it.
So when you put something like this together, where you're putting together things you've already written, is there editing that goes on? Do you change anything, or was it just deciding which ones to put together?
For this first collection of essays, I wanted to include just political essays. I've got another book of essays coming out that's going to be non-political for the most part. And what I did with this one was I introduced each of these 65 essays to provide some historical and biographical context
yes.
Because these essays go back as far back as 1986. Now, the vast majority are from nowhere nearly that far back. A lot of them are from just the last couple of years. But this book provides sort of a good overview of the evolution of American political issues over the last 4 decades. But I did provide some context for particularly the older ones.
We're talking to Douglas Young, and his new book is This Little Opinion. And he also wrote Deep in the Forest and Due South, which were great novels. I mean, a lot of really fun. It's a good, fun read.
Oh, thank you.
So I look forward to rereading them. Those are those kinds of books. But the book starts out with a column about Pat Robertson's likely candidacy. That's how far back that goes, right? And then the last one I love is about Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. So it does go through a wide spectrum of ideas. And interestingly enough, these two just can't stay out of the news, because you've got this, I think, a non-issue around this photograph that the Princess of Wales, Kate Middleton, released for Mother's Day. And I just think, I guess because I'm a woman who gets a headshot done every so often, all right? And my headshots do not look like me, okay? I, in fact, tell the photographer to make me look as close to as I did 10 years ago as possible, okay? So I understand the idea of trying to make a picture look better.
Sure.
And I think there should always be the expectation that, especially in a portrait, maybe not when you're taking pictures of news events, but when you're taking a sit-down portrait of somebody, that somebody's going to go through and touch it up.
It seems so trivial. I mean, we take it for granted that models and celebrities, when they're pictured in People magazine and other publications, it's all touched up. I mean, you tell me, when you go on television programs, don't all the guests go to the makeup room and get made up?
And they touch you up on breaks. They come in and make sure you still look good and do all that kind of stuff.
And what's wrong with that?
Yeah, and I told, first of all, 2 things. There's these, not what's wrong, but 2 things that are interesting. There's ads on TV all the time now of these fantastic phones that we all carry in our pockets that we can edit the pictures on the fly and make them look any way we want to, right? I mean, You've seen those. And then the best story about this, I think, is back in the 90s when Cindy Crawford was kind of at the height of her career. She did an interview with People magazine, and she just did an off-the-cuff comment that she'd just done the swimsuit edition and that they had airbrushed her thighs. And I'm thinking to myself, because I'm a young woman at that time, and I'm going, if Cindy Crawford's thighs have to be airbrushed, what hope is there for me? You know what I'm saying? And so this is not something new.
I agree.
It's and then I had someone, I was going back and forth with someone at the Daily Mail, and they said, yes, but this is our future monarch, and we have to know that we can trust them. We're not talking about, like, affairs of state. What we're talking about is a family photo on Mother's Day where you want it to look as good as you can. My old friend Travis Massey, who used to be a photographer here, he had a number of pictures hanging up on the walls of his studio where he couldn't get all the family members together, and so he would take a picture of the family, and then the ones that couldn't be there would send him a picture, and then they'd all dress the same, so it would look like it was the same thing, and he put it together so that the family could have a whole photo.
Oh,
this was
creative.
30 years ago.
Neat.
I just don't think when you're talking about a family photo. Now, if I understand they're concerned about her health and they're concerned about the fact they've been so private about what she went through as far as this surgery she
Right.
had, but I don't think it's an affair of state. I don't understand it.
No, give her a break. She's just had a health scare, and she strikes me as just a model princess.
Yeah.
Very kind, and someone who is really respectful of the royal family. I'm not aware of any scandals that have ever involved her.
Yeah, not since she became a member of the royal family. I mean, yeah, I guess maybe that dress she wore to get William's attention, back when they were in college was a little bit of a scandal, but it could be anything else. Now, you've written a lot of political. This is mostly political that
Yes,
you've got
ma'am.
here today. And I love the fact that it really gives this progression, folks, of kind of the candidates we were looking at, because we like to think that the time we're in is the worst time ever, or the most controversial time ever. Looking back at this, we were having the same kind of discussion with multiple candidates being put forward,
Right.
people threatening to upturn the apple cart. We just
Right.
didn't have social media. So it
Right.
made it different.
That's true. I'm 62 now, and I'm old enough to where I've seen some cycles run through politically in this country. And I think there are just certain political types and personality types that we have in every generation. And we've always had controversial characters in our politics, and that's okay. The older I get, the less worried I get about things, because I think that our founding fathers were such geniuses. They gave us the greatest political system in the history of the world, with these the separation of powers and these checks and balances. And so I think that we have the best self-correcting system of government the world has ever known. Whenever we veer too far in one direction, the pendulum will swing to the other. It's almost impossible for any one group, much less one man, to control all three branches of government.
Now, you wrote a column that I wanted to ask you about. It was the one about Magic Johnson, AIDS Now Infects Our Body Politic. And you say Magic Johnson is no hero. And I would agree with you that he's not a hero, because it was bad behavior choices that led him to the problem that he had. But I always looked at it as that by him coming forward so honestly, that he probably helped people understand that even Magic Johnson can get AIDS, so you need to be
Yes.
careful.
Right. I think that Irvin Magic Johnson is heroic in being such a positive person, and as you say, coming forth and acknowledging that he had AIDS. Hopefully, he encouraged a lot of people to get tested and to change any destructive sexual habits. But I didn't think he was a hero in the sense that he did not, in my memory, he did not acknowledge, frankly, the behavior that he had engaged in that got him AIDS. And I just think that the fact that the news media made him such a hero for merely having this tragic disease, I thought that was unfortunate. And I still do believe that Martina Navratilova, the feminist tennis player, is right, that if a female athlete had been as sexually promiscuous and as adulterous as Magic Johnson was, and she came down with AIDS and would not acknowledge her sexual behavior had gotten her AIDS, I think that the culture would have been far less forgiving of her, and would have certainly not made her into a hero like it made.
You know, I think that point is well taken. I do think there is still a double standard as it comes from or deals with men and women and their sexual behavior. Okay,
Right.
there definitely is still a double standard. You know, it's still a little bit of, you know, the guys are kind of patted on the back,
Right.
you know, and the girls are saying shame, shame, shame.
Right.
But in most cases, there's got to be a guy and a girl. Not every case, but in most cases, there's
Right.
got to be a guy and a girl that are
takes two-
equally responsible.
Right. It takes
Yeah.
two to tango.
Yeah, so I would tend to agree with you about that, because, you know, you kind of look at what we were talking about before we got on the air about the George Stephanopoulos, Nancy Mace back and forth, that, you know, George Stephanopoulos seemed to want Nancy Mace to be incensed or explain herself relating to her support for Donald Trump, when he worked for a guy that was accused for the same thing.
Bill Clinton, yes, ma'am.
I mean, honestly, really, of the last number, I mean, Joe Biden had a very credible claim made against him, too, that got deep-sixed by the mainstream media in 2020. The woman's name was Tara Reid. I listened to her story. It was very believable as a woman of that era, of that age, of what it was like being in the workplace, being in just a few women and a lot of men. There were assumptions made about you sometimes, and you had to be really clear about the lines that had to be drawn, because there was this attitude, you know, in the early 80s that thankfully has changed dramatically. But I do think it's interesting that he was in that. And I mean, I think the only president that you haven't had these stories about is Barack Obama. I mean, I think he's pretty much not had any of these kinds of accusations made against him.
Right. I've never read or heard any intimations that he was ever involved with anyone outside of his marriage. I mean, he seems to be a devoted husband and father, and I say that as someone who disagrees with almost everything
In
he's
fact,
ever
I was asked to
politically
say something nice about him at one point at some panel a long time ago, and I said, well, he seems like he's a really good husband and father, that he broke the cycle of being, you know, a single, you know, because his mom was a single parent, and so it seems like he broke that cycle, and so he gets some credit for that.
Yes, but I think it's wonderful, and I think it's really important that those of us on the right, I mean, I consider myself a Christian conservative libertarian.
Yeah, very much so.
I think that it's really important for us to applaud anyone on the left whenever we agree with him or her, and vice versa. I mean, one of the columns that I wrote that's in this new collection, of which I'm most pleased, is my happy birthday to President Jimmy Carter column on the occasion of his 99th birthday. I disagree with President Carter's policies and statements to an enormous extent, but I think he has absolutely been an outstanding Christian gentleman, wonderful husband and father, and there are a number of his policies that I actually do like, but and there are several other pieces in the book where I praise liberals when I think that they have really been principled and good folks, like Senator Paul Tsongas. I think was just a wonderful saint of a gentleman.
Well, and because we've created this world where you can't make a mistake.
Right.
You can't admit a mistake.
Right.
And you can't acknowledge that the other side might have a good idea. And you wrote a column about that, the roots of our deep political divide. So just to kind of finish out, and the book is This Little Opinion plus $1.50 will get you a Coke. My dad from New York would have said $1.50. That's it. You know, he goes, plus $1.50 would buy you a Coke. But what do you've observed, you've been a great observer, and you had famously the politically incorrect club,
That's
incorrect club,
yes, ma'am.
where you entertained all points of view. How do we get back on track?
I really think that our country's biggest problem is the rapid rise of secularism. I'm no religious fanatic, but I just think that back 50, 60, 70, 100 years ago, when we had a strong Judeo-Christian culture.
And a community.
Yes, our families were stronger, and we didn't even know, who was a Republican or Democrat in our lives with so many people, and we didn't care. I think that if we could get back to our Judeo-Christian roots more, I think that we would see each other all as children of the book, brothers in Christ, and we would not see each other as enemies. We recognize that we're all sinners. We all fall far short of the grace of God. And I think that when we get so secular, I really believe that we're hardwired to be religious. And when someone is no longer religious, there's a spiritual void that has to be filled. And I think for way too many Americans now, their new religion is politics, and their new faith is their political ideology, and their new church is their political party. And I think that unlike religion, with politics, it's a I win, you lose, or you win, I lose game. And Erik Erikson has said that the cruelest religion of all is secularism. And people talk about how cruel the Old Testament God is. Well, it seems to me the Old Testament God is a heck of a lot more merciful than secular leftists today. Because, my goodness, look at this cancel culture. I mean, someone's entire career can be destroyed by one tasteless joke or one opinion that someone dislikes. And I think that's merciless, and that's not forgiving. The God of the Bible is loving and merciful and forgiving. And so I think if we could be more religious and more tolerant of others, I think that would help us enormously.
The party of tolerance isn't, and we need to find that faith to be more tolerant. Douglas Young, this little opinion. Thanks for being with me today.
Thank you so very, very much. I really appreciate this.